There are moments in your life when you look at yourself, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with a quiet, almost painful honesty. And you recognize that everything you want is sitting behind a door you have avoided opening for years. A door marked with a single word so deceptively simple that people underestimate its weight until they're crushed by the lack of it. Discipline. And before you scroll away, before you tell yourself you've heard this message 1,000 times before, stay with me. Because the truth isn't hiding in the cliché version of discipline you've been fed. It's hiding in the version that makes your throat tighten. Because deep inside, you know that discipline isn't a trait you're born with. It's a battle you choose every single day, especially on the days you least feel like fighting. This entire video, this entire journey you're about to take with me, begins with one uncomfortable question. When was the last time you kept a promise to yourself? Not a promise made to appease someone else, not an obligation meant to look good on paper, but a real, personal, internal vow. One you made quietly, without witnesses, without applause, without any external push. Most people can't answer that question with certainty. They pause, they think, they justify, they rationalize. And in that hesitation lives the entire story of their lives. 1,000 goals, 1,000 dreams, all dependent on a muscle they never trained. Discipline is not about intensity. It's not about motivation. It's not about passion or inspiration or the short-lived thrill of a new beginning. Discipline is consistency in its most brutally unromantic form. Discipline is choosing the action when your mind is full of excuses, choosing the path when your body feels heavy, choosing the routine when the world gives you infinite ways to escape it. It is the art of showing up when no one sees you, the science of doing the small, unseen tasks that accumulate into something colossal over time. The uncomfortable truth is this: you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your discipline. And there is something beautiful, almost poetic, about the idea that greatness does not belong to the gifted, or the lucky, or the chosen. Greatness belongs to the disciplined, to the ones who decide in a moment of absolute clarity that they are tired of being spectators in their own lives, to the ones who build themselves brick by brick, habit by habit, decision by decision, until the person they once were becomes unrecognizable compared to the person they chose to become. Take a moment, right now, and imagine the version of you who never breaks their own promises. Imagine the version of you who wakes up when they said they would, who studies when they planned to study, who trains when they planned to train, who builds when they planned to build. Imagine the version of you who does not negotiate with laziness, who does not bow to procrastination, who does not let fear disguise itself as logic. That version of you exists. It is not a fantasy. It is not out of reach. It is merely unused, untapped, waiting for discipline to carve the path that motivation never could. Because motivation is fragile. It burns bright and dies quickly. But discipline is the quiet flame that refuses to go out. Discipline is what remains when inspiration leaves. Discipline is what carries you through the nights when you feel lost, the mornings when you feel empty, the afternoons when life pulls at you from every direction with distractions disguised as opportunities. Discipline is what keeps you grounded when your emotions swing violently between ambition and despair. Discipline is what gives shape to your chaos and direction to your drifting. And maybe you've been told that you need to feel ready or confident or fearless before you take action. That is a lie. Readiness is a luxury. Confidence is a reward. Fearlessness is a myth. The disciplined move forward despite trembling hands and racing thoughts. They understand that the world will not pause for their doubts. They understand that waiting for motivation is the fastest way to lose momentum. They understand that the hardest part is not doing the work. The hardest part is beginning. Because once you begin, friction turns into flow, resistance turns into rhythm, and hesitation turns into habit. You have failed before, not because you lacked potential, not because you lacked talent, not because you lacked opportunity. You failed because you lacked structure, because you relied on bursts of energy instead of systems, because you were waiting for a perfect moment that will never arrive. Discipline is the antidote to waiting. Discipline is the destroyer of excuses. Discipline is the force that turns ordinary people into extraordinary ones through the simplest, smallest, most consistent actions imaginable. You are not weak. You are untrained. And the difference between those two is everything. Think about how many times you've told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow." How many times you've promised, "This time it will be different." How many times you've convinced yourself that the future version of you will magically possess more courage, more motivation, more strength, but that future version never arrives, not because it's impossible, but because it requires a decision in the present. The version of you that you dream about becoming is built by the version of you sitting here right now, listening to this, deciding whether you will continue living in loops or break into a new trajectory. And if you truly want a different life, if you truly want transformation, growth, change, power, then you have to earn it through action repeated so consistently that failure becomes a temporary inconvenience rather than a permanent identity. The difference between the person who succeeds and the person who doesn't is almost never talent. It is discipline. The disciplined feel the same fear. They face the same obstacles. They endure the same discomfort, but they act. They move. They push. They continue. They refuse to let emotions dictate their limits. Your life is shaped by what you tolerate, and most people tolerate their own excuses far more than they tolerate their dreams. You tell yourself that skipping one day doesn't matter, but skipping one day becomes skipping 1 week, which becomes abandoning the goal entirely. Consistency is not built on intensity, it is built on refusal. The refusal to quit, the refusal to surrender, the refusal to give up on yourself when the initial excitement fades. There is a reason disciplined people appear unstoppable. It's not because they are better. It's because they have built a fortress of habits that protect their goals from their worst impulses. Every disciplined action adds another brick to that fortress. Every fulfilled promise strengthens its walls. Every refused temptation reinforces its foundation. And soon, discipline becomes identity. It becomes the new normal. It becomes the default setting of a person who no longer needs motivation because discipline has turned into instinct. You need to decide how much longer you're willing to live in the space between who you are and who you could be. Because that space, if you stay there too long, slowly becomes a graveyard of potential. And you are not meant to be buried under unfulfilled goals. You are meant to rise through the relentless, sometimes boring, often exhausting, yet always transformative power of discipline. Sometimes discipline doesn't arrive like a lightning strike, dramatic and unmistakable, but instead slips in quietly through the smallest choices you almost didn't notice yourself making, the ones you thought were insignificant, the ones you believed couldn't possibly shift the course of your life, yet somehow, over time, they did. And maybe that's the part we rarely talk about, because everyone loves the image of the warrior who wakes up before dawn, carving greatness from stone with raw determination, but almost no one talks about the person who simply chooses not to quit on a random Tuesday afternoon when no one is watching, when no applause is waiting, when no punishment exists for failing except the subtle ache of knowing you betrayed your own potential. Because discipline isn't dramatic, it's patient, almost unnervingly so. It waits for you in the mundane, in the boring hours, in the routines that feel repetitive and unrewarding. It waits when the world is silent, when the excitement fades, when motivation evaporates, and only you remain confronted with a question that grows heavier the more honestly you try to answer it. Will you still move forward if no one ever praises you for it? Most people don't realize this, but the human mind performs a dangerous trick.
It convinces you that greatness is reserved for the naturally gifted, the lucky, the chosen. It whispers that someone like you, with your flaws and your fears and your inconsistent bursts of effort, could never reach the level of the people you admire. And the tragic part is that many believe that lie. They take it as truth, as destiny, as an unchangeable fact about who they are. But discipline doesn't care about your past failures, your excuses, or the limits you inherited from a life that didn't teach you how powerful you could become. Discipline only cares about one thing: your next decision. And if that sounds too simple, that's because it is. Not easy, but simple. A single decision repeated over months and years becomes a quiet revolution that transforms everything you once thought impossible. And people will try to dismiss it. They'll say it's just habit or routine or consistency, but those are just different names for the same force. Discipline, the invisible architecture behind every extraordinary life. And maybe you've already felt it, that small spark that flickers whenever you imagine who you could become if you finally stopped running from your own potential. Because potential isn't a gift, it's responsibility. It's a contract between who you are and who you could be, signed not with promises, but with action. And you already know whether you've honored that contract or avoided it. We all do. So maybe you're here because something inside you is finally tired of negotiating with your excuses, tired of shrinking, tired of watching opportunities slip through your fingers because discipline was always something you planned to start tomorrow. And maybe for the first time in a very long time, you're ready to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start becoming the kind of person who creates the moment. Discipline doesn't demand perfection, only persistence. And persistence, despite how ordinary it sounds, is one of the rarest forms of courage you will ever develop. Because think about it, courage is not just dramatic gestures or life-altering sacrifices. Sometimes courage is simply the decision to continue showing up even after life has crushed your enthusiasm, sabotaged your plans, drained your energy, and mocked your confidence. It's the ability to rise on days when rising feels humiliating because everything in you insists that failure is inevitable, yet something deeper, quieter, but far stronger refuses to surrender. And that is the beginning of discipline. Not the polished version people post online, but the raw, unglamorous version that grows in the dark, built from disappointments, repeated attempts, and the unshakable belief that you are capable of more than anyone, including yourself, has ever seen. When you choose discipline, you choose discomfort, sacrifice, and repetition, but you also choose growth, mastery, and a version of your life that feels earned, not given. You choose to stop being controlled by your impulses, your moods, and the unpredictable waves of motivation that vanish the moment things get difficult. You choose to stop relying on emotion and start relying on structure. Emotion gets tired. Structure does not. Emotion hesitates. Structure executes. Emotion reacts. Discipline decides. And perhaps the most incredible part is that discipline isn't something you're born with. It's something you build piece by piece through the relentless repetition of deliberate choices. You strengthen it by saying no when the world hands you an easy escape, and yes when the universe tests your commitment. And yes, you will fail repeatedly, sometimes embarrassingly, but failure is not proof of inadequacy, it is proof of effort. Failure is not a sign that you should quit. It is a sign that you are trying to become someone you have never been before. Now imagine this. Imagine waking up one day months from now, standing in the very life you once wished for, realizing that none of it happened because of luck or sudden brilliance, but because you made hundreds of small, disciplined decisions that the world never saw. Imagine the quiet pride of knowing you didn't wait for permission, inspiration, or motivation. You built your future with your own persistence. Imagine realizing that the person you once envied has become the person you now are.
But before you get there, you must confront the uncomfortable truth that most people avoid. Discipline requires sacrifice, and most people don't want to sacrifice anything. They want the results without the repetition, the success without the struggle, the transformation without the discomfort. They want a reward that their habits do not align with. They want to win without training, learn without failing, grow without stretching, and rise without the weight of effort. And because the world allows them to dream without acting, they spend their lives in a loop, always planning, always intending, always imagining, but never becoming. But you are here because something inside you refuses that fate. Something inside you knows that the versions of yourself you've lost along the way are not dead, they are waiting. Something inside you knows that a disciplined life is not restrictive, it is liberating. Because the moment you choose discipline, you stop being a prisoner to your impulses. You stop negotiating with laziness. You stop bargaining with fear. You stop allowing temporary feelings to sabotage permanent desires. You begin to understand that discipline is not about punishing yourself, it is about freeing yourself from the limitations you once accepted as truth. It is the decision to reclaim control over your life, your habits, your future. And as you grow, something incredible happens. Your identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. You stop identifying with your failures and start identifying with your efforts. You stop believing you are inconsistent and start proving day after day that consistency is something you are capable of creating. And slowly, gradually, the world around you changes, not because the world actually changed, but because you did. Opportunities that once seemed unreachable now appear within range. Challenges that once scared you now feel conquerable. Tasks that once felt heavy now become routine. And people who once doubted you start asking how you did it, unaware that the answer is simple: discipline. The one force they overlooked because they believed it was too small to matter. But it mattered. It mattered more than luck, more than talent, more than timing, more than raw potential. Because potential means nothing without discipline. Potential is the seed, discipline is the growth. And as the sentences stretch longer, as the thoughts deepen, as the ideas weave themselves into a more intricate pattern, it becomes clear that discipline is not just a tool. It is a philosophy, a worldview, a quiet rebellion against the version of yourself that refuses to evolve. It is the intentional restructuring of your habits, your attention, your priorities, and your identity into something refined, focused, and resilient. It is the deliberate act of forging yourself into a person capable of holding the weight of their own dreams. It is the understanding that greatness is not achieved in grand moments, but hidden in the invisible monotony of repetition, in the silent spaces where no rewards exist, in the private battles you fight against the urges that try to pull you back into who you used to be. And when you grasp this fully, when you embrace the discomfort, the slowness, the frustration, the repetition, you become something the world rarely encounters: a disciplined human being who shapes their fate instead of waiting for it. Someone whose life is not built on chance, but on choice. Someone who realizes that every extraordinary achievement is nothing more than ordinary discipline performed consistently over time. Someone who chooses who they will become with intention, precision, and unwavering self-command. And so, as this chapter continues its long, winding ascent into deeper layers of meaning, expanding its sentences, stretching its thoughts, building its cadence into something more intricate, more deliberate, more fully formed, let this truth echo. Discipline is not a punishment, it is a path. One that requires patience, resilience, and a devotion to the future self you are building brick by brick, decision by decision, day by day. And if you follow it, if you commit to it, if you give it the respect it deserves, it will carry you to a place where luck becomes irrelevant, talent becomes secondary, and your life becomes the undeniable result of your own relentless transformation. And maybe this is the part people never admit out loud. the part where discipline stops being a heroic idea and becomes something painfully ordinary. Because real discipline isn't fireworks, it isn't aesthetic, it isn't a montage with music rising behind you. It's waking up on days when your chest feels heavy and your mind is fogged over and your goals seem so far away that they almost feel imaginary. It's choosing to rise anyway. It's choosing movement over paralysis. And you don't do it because you feel powerful. You do it because you've quietly decided that your future is worth the discomfort of now. You do it because there is something inside you, something small, something fragile, something that barely whispers but never dies, that believes you are capable of more than the limited world you see today. People think discipline is some roaring emotion, but the truth is, it's often quiet. Quiet like the turning of a page. Quiet like tying your shoelaces before dawn. Quiet like rewriting the same sentence 3 times because the first 2 didn't honor your own potential. Quiet like closing your eyes and telling yourself, I will try again. Discipline is subtle, but subtle does not mean weak. Subtle is the root of everything that grows. Because you do not need to feel extraordinary to build something extraordinary. You only need to repeat the small action long enough that it becomes undeniable. You only need to outlast the version of yourself that quits too early. You only need to let consistency become your identity, one deliberate choice at a time. And when you look back, it won't be the grand days that changed you. It will be the quiet ones, the lonely ones, the overlooked ones, the days you didn't brag about, the days nobody praised you for, the days you didn't want to move but you moved anyway. Those are the days that sharpened you. Those are the days that built your strength. Those are the days that shaped your spine. Your future self is built from the days when you refused to betray yourself. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe you don't need motivation. Maybe what you need is loyalty. Loyalty to the person you are trying to become. Loyalty to the life you haven't reached yet. Loyalty to the dream that hasn't fully materialized, but keeps tugging at the back of your mind because it knows you're capable of reaching it if you stop abandoning the process the moment it becomes uncomfortable. Because discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort is the sculptor. Discomfort carves you into the person you pretend you already are. So when the world feels heavy on your back and the road ahead looks long and your effort feels invisible, remind yourself, everything great is invisible long before it becomes obvious. Roots grow before trees rise. Muscles tear before they strengthen. Mastery looks like failure until the final repetition suddenly reveals what all the previous ones meant. You are not failing, you are forming. And that is why discipline matters, because discipline keeps you moving during the invisible phase. The phase where nobody understands your vision. The phase where progress seems microscopic. The phase where the dream is too new to defend itself. The phase where you could easily give up and the world would not even notice. But you would notice. Even if no one else sees the consequences, you would feel them. Because every time you walk away from something you care about, a small part of you dims. Not enough to see immediately, not enough to alarm you, but enough to gradually blur the edges of the person you could have been. And the reverse is also true. Every time you choose discipline over ease, your life doesn't magically change, but you change. You sharpen, you focus, you shift. You begin to feel different, think differently, expect differently. You begin to hold yourself to a higher standard quietly without needing anyone to applaud you for it. That's the beautiful thing about discipline. It teaches you to respect yourself long before the world learns to. And eventually, after enough repetition, after enough days where you drag yourself forward instead of waiting for inspiration to carry you, something strange begins to happen.
you begin to crave the work. You begin to crave the progress. You begin to crave the version of yourself that appears only through consistency. Discipline stops being a burden and becomes a refuge. It becomes the one thing in your life that cannot be taken from you because you built it with your own hands, your own effort, your own stubborn refusal to quit. And through all of this, you begin to realize that greatness is never something you aim at once. It is something you return to every day, not with perfection, but persistence. Because persistence wins in the long run. Persistence rewrites identity. Persistence builds lives. And persistence, quiet, steady, uneventful persistence, turns ordinary people into the kind of individuals others look at and say, "How did they do it?" And you will know the truth. They did it in silence when no one was watching. So if today feels dull or heavy or unremarkable, don't underestimate it. Today might be the day you build the strength you'll rely on years from now. Today might be the day you keep going long enough to break a pattern that has haunted you for years. Today might be the day your future self looks back at and says, "That was the moment everything began to change." Not because the world shifted, but because you did. And maybe the reason discipline feels so difficult is because deep down, you know it is the doorway to the life you've wanted for years. And stepping through that doorway means letting go of the excuses, the past, the comfortable patterns, the familiar doubts. Discipline demands evolution. It demands a shedding of the version of you that once believed you weren't capable of more. But you are. You always have been. You just needed the courage to prove it to yourself, repetition after repetition, day after day, long after the excitement disappears. And that is why you will win. Not because you are the fastest, or the strongest, or the most gifted, but because you are the one who refuses to walk away from your own potential. You are the one who shows up when it's hard. You are the one who stays when others quit. You are the one who decides over and over that your future is worth the discomfort of now. You are the one who keeps going. When the noise fades and the screen begins to dim, remember this. Every story you've ever admired was written by someone who refused to stop turning the page. And now, it's your turn. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, if it reminded you of the person you're still becoming, then stay with us. This channel exists for people who are ready to rise, people who are tired of running from their potential, people who want more from their own lives. So before you leave, breathe, reset, and take a moment, then hit subscribe because I want you here for the next chapter. Like the video if it moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear these words today, and carry this truth with you. Discipline is not punishment. It's the quiet promise you make to the future version of yourself. And every day you honor that promise, you step closer to the life you were meant to live. Until the next video, stay focused, stay grounded, and never stop becoming the strongest version of yourself.